Welcome to Londres, the Wav.digital podcast that explores how Swiss companies use the full potential of AI and digital in their everyday operations. Today, I'm joined by Jan Müller, CEO and co-founder of Audiospace, a Zurich-based company that builds digital audio platforms for radio stations and brands. In nearly 5 years, Audiospace has deployed hundreds of platforms across Switzerland and around the world, working with broadcasters from local Swiss stations all the way to one of the top 10 radio group in the US. Jan also recently took over the Swiss station My 105 as its owner. In this episode, we are going to explore how digital is transforming the radio world, how AI is changing the way Audiospace works day to day, and how Jan and his team are building their products with AI. Jan, in 30 seconds, on who you are and what Audiospace does, can you tell me a bit more? Welcome, first of all. Hi.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the chance to talk to you in person. I mean, we know each other mostly from phone calls, and it's always good to meet in person. It's like that with many clients we have. I only know them from phone calls, as we have clients across the world. And myself, I love radio. I love media. I understood that when I was about 10, 12 years old. Since then, I'm developing radio. The last years I was spending on technology. And I think that is a very important tool in the world we live to reach out to the user, to reach the audience. For me, it's important that what radio does has an impact, and technology became kind of a tool to generate impact. And I think in the digital transformation where radio right now is, it's more important than ever to understand on what tools you need to set the priority to develop a business model. Everything can only work if you have a business model, and as radio has reached the borders of the business model in the traditional distribution, I think the next generation of radio is going to grow in the online environment, and that's where I wanted to be and what I wanted to understand deeply. That's why we built Audiospace, where we deliver technology to hundreds of radio stations across the globe.
Cool. And Audiospace, how many platforms do you have active running today, like in Switzerland and in the world?
I stopped counting them because, in the US, we have the biggest market. It's a bit more than 400 radio stations which use our technology. It is nice. If I arrive to the US, to any city, I know there is a radio station in that city using our technology, and that feels very good somehow because you are in exchange with I will call it motherland of radio. I think radio has its origin a bit in the US, at least the entertainment part, the famous people like Howard Stern. So this is the biggest market of us. Another big market is Germany, also a market which has a big impact on radio from my point of view. And in total, there's probably a bit more than 500, 600 platforms, something like that. With platforms, I mean apps and websites. So we develop for some radio stations only apps, for others only websites, and for some both platforms. And that's what we then call the ecosystem.
Okay. And on the topic of radio, like you say, the US are the motherland of radio.
Yes.
Now, with all the information and all the contacts you have, how do you see the radio shifting over the last few years based on what you observed on the platforms? Like, what are the main changes?
Well, one of the main changes is the business model. It's now performance-based. That means an advertiser, so most of the radio stations earn money with ads, right, is a performance-based business. Radio has been measured until today, still actually here in Switzerland, the most important value we associate with radio through estimations. It's not a precise number. Here in Switzerland, it works with a watch, which listens what's around you and which maps then that with a radio station counts then some numbers. It's a calculation. But advertisers in the time we live want to have a clear understanding on the impact of an ad, on an impact of their spendings. and they want to measure it nearly in real time. And I think DAB Plus as well as FM, which are the major distribution methods of radio in a terrestrial world, are not made to deliver such results. And that's why more and more the online environment becomes relevant from the advertising perspective, because there you have clear measurements on impact. And another very important use case of radio is the car, but it's probably the most important use case of radio, of the linear traditional radio, I have to say. And in the car, the radio is also a bit in danger, because car manufacturers understood that their zone is actually something they can enrich with a subscription. So it's only a question of time until you can buy a subscription from Mercedes, Volkswagen, etc. You already can with Tesla, for example. And that subscription will bring you internet to the car. It's internet because internet is the base for many advanced services, like, for example, maps, like, for example, messaging services, but of course also entertainment services. And to illustrate that it worth buying a subscription, and they will put digital services to the forefront. So the first you will see in future when you start a car is connected services that you can get through internet, because the car wants to sell internet subscriptions. And this is why radio has a position in the car where it's going to move more and more in the background. And there is, of course, industries which fight against that, but I think it's a natural development. You also know that from the remote control from your TV, you have a Netflix button, you have some other streaming providers which are already featured there, that are global providers which have a much stronger impact than an individual radio station, for example. And that's why radio needs to be, and that's a very important statement, a very strong brand. I believe in brands. And I believe that brands are going to win the challenge. And that's why I would recommend to every radio station to invest in the brand.
Okay, and if we go further in the listener perspective, do you have like things that have surprised you over the last years, like in a way like your listeners are behaving, or like maybe not going in the direction that you thought they were, or maybe faster or something? Like from the data you collect or the information that you get from the broadcasters you work with?
I mean, we see numbers from radio stations across the world. And we can really say radio has a strong impact on the users they have. We see users a lot of time spending on a radio platform, a lot of time listening. And that surprises me, the quality of the numbers. I mean, in general, the numbers can be higher, of course, but the engagement of those users which are using radio is impressive from my point of view. So that's also very important to understand. It's not always about the amount of people. It's in many cases about the quality of the relation with the people you already have. And that quality is becoming a more important value in any digital negotiation. And I think radio has a strong opportunity here. And what I also want to encourage, radio is not only in a difficult position, they have also benefits. For example, it's much easier for a radio station to transfer its users to an online platform, so to convert them for every other brand which is starting a media company in the online environment. We call that user acquisition costs. So what do you think? How much does a radio station or an online brand have to pay to get one download or to get one conversion from a user on the own platform? What do you think? What is the price currently?
Just to say, I wasn't expecting to answer a question myself.
Let's just guess it.
No, I'd say like if I would be okay to pay like 50 cents for a person or something for a user, maybe.
Yeah, well,
fully converted, but
the number is around $30 right now, probably 35. So that's what you have to pay to get a user through advertising, right? In total.
Yeah.
Now imagine how easy radio stations can get users if they bring in a natural trigger. Like, for example, if you want to participate in that contest, download our application. So as a radio station has already a loyal community, even if that community is probably a bit older, you can transfer it for free to your online platform. And if you do that at the right time, then you have a great chance to be strong positioned with, I think, a very interesting amount of effort. And this is what I would like to share with radio stations to encourage them to do that right now, because that's a big benefit they have.
And previously, we were also speaking about like the feeling of community and exchanging, and radio being only not a one-way communication, but actually two ways, like people engaging with the radio. And do you think, I think it's one of the strong suits of radio against the Spotify or podcast or things like this. How do you see that, and how do you encourage radio into that direction?
Love that question. Radio is a shared listening experience. That's what you need to understand. This is the USP. USP is not music. It's also not the best music. It's also not today's best music. It's probably a positioning. You can use music to position your brand yourself. But the USP of radio is that many people are listening to the same content at the same time. And it's a community listening situation which should be illustrated and which should be understood by the audience. So listening to a radio station is something which gives me the opportunity to exchange, to share, and to not feel alone.
And it makes me, it remembers me a lot about also how Twitch or other platforms like this are working. Is like younger generations are actually craving a lot more of live interaction with the people they follow, but they are not into radio. What are your, maybe your guesses in how the things will evolve, or how do you think you can catch that younger generation being a radio, having done this for many years, and actually seeing another platform doing that same thing, but for a younger generation who doesn't want to listen to radio, maybe, or doesn't yet listen to radio?
It is a very hard question. I don't know the answer. I think nobody knows the answer. What we know is that if we ask our friends, do your kids listen to radio? They all say no. And this is not to be changed from today to tomorrow. First of all, it's the content. I think younger people don't see necessarily a big value in the content radio produces. So we would need to understand what content do we need to produce that they get attracted. Then what is the discovery life cycle? So where does a young person discover a radio station? It's of course on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram, on those programs, Snapchat. This is also important that you produce that type of content to tease your interest in content to that audience on that platforms. Many radio stations can improve in this from my point of view. And you also need to understand that you don't only produce for the linear radio, you produce for your brand. As I mentioned before, radio is a brand and people need to love that brand. It's as simple as that. And it's probably not the linear distribution younger generations are using. They like to listen on demand. They like to watch on demand. So I would say, don't build a radio station, build a brand, define the target group, and use the linear distribution to promote this brand. And that keeps you safe. And that can attract younger audiences. Of course it can. But most radio stations come from a different traditional approach, and it's very hard for them to change. They have now people employed, which know what they know from the past. So no radio station is starting from scratch. If you would build a radio station today, it would be probably a completely different setup than what you have now brought into today's environment from the past. So to answer your question is, I believe in the content. If you have content which is interesting to that target group, you can associate it with your brand. And of course, younger people listen to audio content. I mean, they say podcasts are important to attract younger people. Other studies now showcase that short audio clips can be very relevant for the near future. I believe in everything. I just believe in the content at the end. And I don't believe that radio stations in Switzerland, for example, have approached really younger audiences. I mean, with young, I mean 15 to 25 probably, something like that.
Yeah.
When I was working at the radio, I also noticed that less and less young people apply for a job at the radio station. When I was starting at a radio station, I was a show host at the beginning. There were about 100 competitors which wanted the same job I have. And now you can really feel it's a low amount because there is not a culture, not a natural interest from young people to radio. And radio stations need to ask themselves why. It's not only the technology, it's not only because it's only in cars, it's probably because there is not relevant content for younger people.
Sure. Yeah, interesting. And how would you describe like the competition or the relationship with like audio streaming platforms like Spotify, YouTube Music, and like?
I mean, Spotify is replacing the shop, if you ask me. It's a massive offer, which impacts on the production of music, actually. I mean, music has been produced differently in the last years because of Spotify. There is not many long players anymore. There is many singles. Playlisting is important to be in the right playlist. It's important to have short music clips. Track duration is reduced by a minute on average, probably. A track on average now is probably 2.5 minutes instead of 3.5 minutes, which was the normal duration 10 years ago. So Spotify is impacting the music world. Then they started investing in podcasts because it's cheaper for Spotify if you listen to a podcast than if you listen to music.
They don't have to pay for.
I don't want to guess
price.
here, but my feeling says it was also an economic decision to go into that area. And it's a growing field, of course. Podcasting is attractive, and now they're spending much time on the video layer. But I don't think that's what Spotify is famous for. Spotify is not famous for video. Spotify is famous to get all the music in a very clean user experience, in a very good performance, in a very fast performance. They really revolutionized the way how you can stream music because they developed their own streaming technology, their own streaming format. There is a good Netflix documentary about it. Recommend. It's actually not a documentary. It's a normal movie. Would recommend to watch this. And Spotify is occupying the music space, the premium music space. Radio is a mix of many audio content formats, which is community, which is music. Music is probably more to emotionalize the content and to position the brand. But what's also the curation can be important. So people are lazy today. They just want to press one button and receive something they can trust and they like, and they don't want to think too much about playlisting. Spotify comes and says, hey, we solved that with AI. People say me, yeah, that's great. Or people say me, oh, no, I don't like the curation of Spotify. So there's different opinions. But radio is still a very strong curator of music. So we use tools like Music Master to create the perfect playlist. We use human brains to make it happen. And we use local influences, which can't be catched 100% by an algorithm to make that flow work. So I think the curation is still one of the important fields in the music area radio has.
Yeah, okay. And we spoke about the US before and Germany, and maybe do you have what are the most striking differences in how broadcasters explore their digital presence between Switzerland, Europe, and the US, maybe?
I think it's an interesting question. The way how radio stations have to pay for music in the US is very different than in Europe. So many people don't know that. But in the US, as a radio station, if you deliver your content online, you pay by performance. What's a performance? If you, Olivier, listen to a song, that's one performance. So what actually the radio station does, the radio station needs to report to the copyright societies. It's called Sound Exchange in the US, that specific society. The number of people which have been listening to that, let's say, Bryan Adams song at 9 o'clock in the morning. So they measure how many stream downloads they have per minute, and they check what song has been played at that minute, and they need to pay an amount per person who has listened to that song. That results in a situation that's very expensive to deliver music, and it's not 100% predictable. The more people that listen, the more costs you have.
Okay.
So you find very rarely in the US a situation that a radio station has multiple web channels like dance, pop, etc., because it's just too expensive to offer such a thing. So in a perfect radio app, for example, you see probably one station, or it's an aggregation platform where you see multiple stations from one network, but all the other content is not music. So they probably don't want you to listen too much music in the radio app because it's expensive. We also see radio stations which block the content outside their state, not the country, their state. If you are in another state, you can't listen to that radio station because the radio station says, why should I spend money on people I cannot monetize through advertising? And this is a reality we see, especially in the US, which is completely opposite here in Europe. And I think Germany, for example, has a very healthy and good streaming market. So what we see here in Germany, for example, is very high consumption. What we see on both sides of the world is that push notifications are a very strong trigger to activate communities. So every radio station should think about what type of content do we need to offer to work with push notifications that activates very strongly. Yeah. And there is other differences which are market specific, for example, from the formats. So what we see in big markets like US is that you have a lot of special radio formats like sports stations, which only do talk and sports. They only talk. They talk 24 hours. They have no music. That's a very interesting model because that's a type of content you can offer on demand fully. So a sports station platform looks completely different than a top 40 music station platform. So what radio has in the US is more segments, more categories. Here in Switzerland, we grew with the regional radio stations, which basically all do the same or a similar music format, but they have been separated by regions because FM was only covering one specific part of Switzerland. So you see the same station format in Geneva, then in probably Bern, then in Solothurn, then in Zurich. So you see in every market that, let's say, adult contemporary music format has been ranking as a top position. So it's not so much positioning through the content type, it's more positioning through a region in Switzerland. That's also can be very different than in the US.
Okay. Does it explain also why podcast has grown so much in the US in comparison to Europe, like podcast as a whole thing being so huge, so much bigger in the US than it's in Europe right now, and even if it's growing everywhere?
I mean, the US is a perfect podcast market for many reasons. The reason number one is the language. A lot of people talk English across the globe. It's the language number one, of course, not in terms of population maybe, but in terms of distribution. And I believe that's a strong impact. I mean, more than 50% of US Americans listen to podcasts, more than 50%. And this is more than 50% of the global podcast market. Also, more than 50% of the global podcast revenue is made in the US. And I believe another important indicator on this is that you have the personalities there. So from the cultural standpoint, you really have the economical situation that a big market automatically generates a big industry. So there is money inside. So with more money, there is more professional approaches, better content, which attracts again other people's, right? That's an important life cycle. But you have also from a cultural standpoint, people who really say, here I am. I touched the microphone. Sorry for the blow. Here I am. That's me. And I'm talking about myself and my dog for the next 60 minutes. And I'm going to make it entertaining. Okay. So they have that self-confidence to entertain. And I think that's also important.
Okay. Okay. If we go now to another topic, is mainly to discuss a bit about AI and how do you use AI personally in your day-to-day, if you do, and what do you like?
Honestly, I use AI for everything. It's so boring. I mean, sometimes I ask myself, and I know you do the same. Come on, you can say you do not, but actually, I'm a lazy person. My favorite prompt is write better. So whatever I write, I feed ChatGPT with write better, and it was just very easy to copy it from ChatGPT to paste it in an email. I can translate easily in every language. So yes, I use that. On actually 90% of the emails I'm sending, I'm using AI in a form. I also use AI to improve workflows, to speed up workflows. I'm not necessarily using AI yet in areas where it's very personal. I would, for example, never accept a support hotline where you can call and an AI voice would answer. That's a moment where it needs to be personal. So I'm mostly using it in areas where people don't really care if it's made with AI or not. But people have an opinion about AI, and I try to hide it from the areas where people think, you don't like me if you give me that AI tool. I'm a person, I need appreciation. So I'm here. Please talk to me in person.
They are using it personally a lot, but they don't want to be forced to use it.
Yeah, exactly. There is something which makes them believe that it's important. It's not respectful if you use AI in some situations. And probably they're right. So I'm not judging it. That's only what I'm observing. And in the development we use a lot of AI. I mean, we can increase speed dramatically. Actually, the discussion about AI is it's fascinating me that it's good if people have an opinion, but at the end, they don't really have a choice. I mean, at the end, you need to have a business model, and the business model is based on resources and time. And it's just such a strong booster that I believe just a few businesses can afford to say, no, I don't need that boost. So your competitor is going to be faster, better. And if you say, I'm not interested in this, you need really to be a famous watch brand, which has a tradition of 100 years to survive that decision. And I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Even then.
Not sure.
Yeah.
But But on a personal base, like maybe one AI tool that you've adopted, or maybe one thing that you don't do anymore because you let AI handle it. Like you mentioned sending emails, but writing emails, but are there other things that you used to do, like on which you were used to spend time and now you're
mostly legal stuff in my environment. I would never let AI write the final contract. But I mean, again, if you want to adapt something in a contract, I don't need to call a legal person all the time. I can also ask an AI to give me a suggestion or to improve a text. In the visual and graphic production environment, this is actually interesting that it has first had a strong impact on the creative area. I always believe that stuff like public transport, etc., is going to be replaced by AI solutions first. So mass solutions, but no, it's the creative business which is going to be impacted and is impacted. So I use AI for many creative processes like creating pictures, creating music for jingles, removing voice, improving voice. I mean, also in a podcast production, you have a lot of different AI tools to use. We use AI to improve ad delivery. And so a part of my company is also dedicated to monetize our clients' inventory. And in this case, we can use AI, for example, to have the perfect fit in between the advertiser and the platform where the advertiser advertises. So actually, in all the areas you find a use case for AI, I think in the development part where we develop software, AI is relevant now as a booster. It has an impact of speed, 4 times, 5 times faster, 6 times in some cases. Always depends the application and the use case. But AI is everywhere, and that's the reality.
Yeah, and we'll go to the development part afterwards. So just before, And with all the radio stations you work with, how do you see their reaction towards AI? How do you feel them, like maybe comparing in the US, comparing to Europe, or maybe here in Switzerland? How do you see them using AI? Are they afraid, or how are they reacting?
I mean, on the radio station side, there is a discussion on should a radio host be synthetic? Can he be an AI voice? Is there really a need to have a real host? Some stations position themselves as 100% AI. Others say we are AI free, only real people, organic. So who knows what's the expectation of a listener? I don't see yet that AI is going to replace the radio hosts, honestly. I don't see that. And I don't believe in it. I believe AI is a tool to improve, to help, to speed up. But we need to be careful that we still keep a human factor in it. Otherwise, we replace ourselves 100%. I mean, there's always a cheaper solution. I see radio stations understanding the value of real people talking to real people. I mean, the listener is also not an AI. So you want probably really somebody you can touch and you can follow. What we see on our end is, for example, that when we develop stuff like community features, we just developed a chat where you can chat with other people. We replaced the full screen player in an application, which is the view where you have the big cover, the artist and the title, with, let's call it, Instagram-like live feed, where people can send in an emoji, can send in a small text. A feature which was hard to develop in the past because everybody could just write something against the community guidelines, could state some stuff you don't want to distribute as a radio station. So in this specific case, AI is a very good filter. AI can detect automatically what somebody is writing and ban a person if that person is writing something against the community guidelines. So this is a cool use case. So more and more, the more we talk about it, I think whatever is giving your brand a face should be human, and whatever is supporting to speed up processes, to lower costs in reaching your goals can be AI driven. I think that's a rule that could count for that moment. Let's see what's tomorrow.
Yeah. And outside audio, outside radio, maybe a company you look to for like how they integrate AI or into their daily work or into their processes, into what they're doing. Like, do you have any things that you find in other topics interesting that you look out for?
Let's take Q Music. It's a radio station. I think they're in Netherlands and in Belgium. I was at the Radio Days in Europe where they presented their tool, and their tool allows to receive messages through the app, like WhatsApp. It can be a voice message, can be a text message, and they use AI to prepare immediately 3 answers the host can send back to the listener. You can customize it, of course, but the idea is to be able to answer very fast. So as a listener, you get a personalized answer from the host very fast. So it stays a personal experience, a brand where I can generate a personal connection. Great idea. And for the host, it makes it just manageable to also answer messages.
Many messages.
Yeah. In between the songs. And there is more AI they built in, so they can transcribe a voice memo. You can mark a part of the text and it automatically cuts the rest. You can improve the audio with an AI generated audio improver if the voice is bad quality, etc. So they have built tools to improve the relationships between them and the community with AI. But it's still real people, but AI is improving.
They are reinforcing the many-to-one communication with the help of AI.
Exactly.
Because like when the audience is speaking to the the voice, they are many-to-one instead of one-to-many. So interesting.
And I like it very much.
Outside of audio, outside of radio, any example?
Of cool tools?
Yeah.
Wow. There are so many cool tools. I'm thinking about which is my favorite. Probably I like Nano Banana.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Generating images.
Yeah, I like that. Because it's
Okay.
better than others. And I would say this is probably one of my favorite tools in the creative space. So if you want to create nice presentations fast, it can help. But there is many others. I forgot everything now because I need to point out one. But
No problem.
yeah.
And you mentioned about the development and AI in development. So how would you say, like, how did it start? Like, how did you start to integrate AI into the development, and how are you now with this into the process?
Well, we started integrating AI at a very early stage. I would say 2 years ago on a strategical level. We used it before to test and to find out, and we have a suite of AI tools right now we use in the process. It's not one tool, all with the goal to improve the speed. So especially a company as us can now be much bigger. This is a benefit we have as, I would say, a mid-sized company, which is acting globally. We have many feature requests, and we can really cover more of such requests in a shorter time. A problem we experienced then is that development was so fast that testing was too slow. So it was not really improving the process at the beginning. We also needed to improve the testing process and also use then AI there. And if not, you get so much results that you're not able to keep the quality. So I think quality assurance was the biggest challenge for us when implementing AI, because speed was so massive that our quality systems were not prepared to maintain that speed. And on the other side, you also need to be careful that you keep the user experience you have built, because AI learns with the time, but when you start using AI tools, it's a harder and stronger way to make sure that new developed features with AI are consistent with pre-existing components. So to make it look fully integrated, that's the time-consuming thing, and you need to dedicate your time on it. Also on the support level, we use more and more AI, not necessarily on the front end, but to create faster answers, similar as we have just described with QMusic before. So we started using AI around 2 years ago, and I would say it's now an essential part of our development process, and I think we would not like to go back again.
Okay. And do you have example of features that you couldn't have developed, or that you wouldn't have thought about a few years back that were made possible by?
It was really the chat feature, because from development standpoint, it's the maintenance of a feature. From a development standpoint, it's easy to develop a chat. It's not something you need AI. Of course, AI makes development faster, but you don't need AI to develop a chat. But then in the use case, the AI becomes relevant because the radio station has no resources to make sure nobody writes bad stuff in there. So that is actually a very good example of where the use of AI was a precondition to develop it.
Okay. And how do you integrate it in the team? How do you really work with like your developers and your CTO, and how did you integrate AI within this work process?
This is probably something that our CTO should answer, that AI should answer. Also,
it's interesting to see the way you see it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can tell you about my concerns at the beginning.
Yes.
My concern was, hey, if we give them our source codes, everything we have developed in the last years is now with them. Why should we make them stronger? That was my first idea, because I understood that everybody needs now to share the source codes, and that makes the system more powerful and powerful. So I didn't want to feed a third-party company with our knowledge.
And how did you overcome that concern?
Well,
who convinced you?
they just used it, isolated, and they showed me a result of a feature. And they told me, yeah, we have made that yesterday after work in 30 minutes. I was like, wow, in 30 minutes. And then I understood what opportunities there are. And I also understood that we are maybe not so relevant, big, and unique as we believe that we would not share this code or parts of the code. There is still parts, of course, we would never share with AI. So a lot of things we can't share with AI tools. So this was the moment, the result. Actually, the result in a short time. It's a similar experience like if you ask ChatGPT the first time to write you a song text or something like that. You were, wow. So I had that similar wow experience on the coding level, and it took me away. I just understood immediately that if you are not part of that evolution, you are probably losing your business model sooner than you think. I mean, another thing is we are a technology company, right? So AI can also develop apps and websites already. So we need to be super advanced in everything. So we need to use AI to make our apps on a completely different level than what you would get when you would use a prompt to create an app. So we have no other chance than to deep dive in that topic because it's the topic number one in technology around the globe.
Okay. And do you monitor token usage, or like how do you monitor the usage of what you do? Do you do it? How do you monitor the tools that are being used, or like the way the consumption of tokens, or like the cost of developing with AI? Do you monitor it, or is it still low?
No, I mean, we have a suite of tools. Those tools have limits. We have the highest subscriptions on all those tools to not reach the limits. Sometimes if we reach the limit, I see the depression on the face of the developers. Now I don't have AI for 24 hours. You see, they have to detox quickly and to work. And I then always do jokes like, oh, now you need to use your brain. Congratulations, you're back in life. But you see really how addicted you get to use those tools. And well, to answer your question, we have that suite of tools. We have that limits per user, which are enough to develop a lot. But sometimes our people use it even more extensively. Then they need to wait some hours to get it back. This is what I can describe. Everything else would need to describe our CTO.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Jan. I think just to close, do you have anything to add, like something we haven't discussed, or maybe a question that I should have asked that I did not ask?
No, actually, I've been talking a lot. Thanks a lot for all those questions. Let's go in that future to all the radio stations, all the media companies. I want to encourage, again, to spend money on the brand and time on the brand, because I think the brand is everything. And thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking the time and all this very insightful information and sharing. Thank you very much, Jan.
Merci beaucoup.